Good day traders, welcome to this week's RMD Weekly Market Overview. It's been another big week in the markets with a lot of big moves playing out as per our video last week. This week will no doubt be even bigger, especially considering what happens tomorrow in the US. Remember to keep safe out there and make some notes as I'm expecting some excellent opportunities this week. I'm now going to let a disclaimer roll and I will see you back in the charts. We are starting with the US dollar to South African rand, and last week couldn't have played out closer to our analysis from our video last week. Price reached a short-term target that we set at $16.10, then broke through the weekly pivot to retest the area of support that we mentioned at 16.44. That was our weekly R1 pivot. And from there, we mentioned that we will probably see another leg lower, and that is exactly what happened, and that is where price then closed last week. So for this week, we can either look at this from one of two ways. The first one would be where we can consider that we had a breakout higher from this bearish channel, and we are currently just retesting this level, meaning we are expecting to move higher. Or what we can see is that perhaps this is still part of a bigger bearish move, and we can perhaps expect another move lower towards this area of our weekly S1 pivot at 16.04. However, it's worth noting that the areas of immediate resistance would be at the weekly pivot at 16.26, as well as the monthly pivot at 16.36. So should price move back into these areas, we will have to keep a close eye on price action to see whether it's going to reject from these areas or break through them. Also keep an eye on this 4-hour 100 SMA that we have here in blue. As you can see, price has currently and has previously also rejected this level. So that would be a key indicator to see whether we will see a price higher or another move lower. In order to see a larger bullish move play out, we will have to get above these areas of resistance, especially this 4-hour 100 SMA. And that could then perhaps open up targets of 16.55, which is the yearly R2, and anything above that could perhaps open up this area of 16.64, which is the monthly R1 pivot, and also where we will meet up with major diagonal resistance. We are now moving on to the Euro USD. Last week saw an immediate sell-off with price realizing all of our short targets and only finding some support near the weekly S2 pivot at 1.163. This is also where it met up with support from the daily 100 SMA that we have projected on the 4-hour time frame, as you can see over here. For this week, it would be very interesting to see how price action reacts at this level. So if price were to find some support from our 100 daily SMA, the areas of immediate resistance would firstly be this area at 1.169. That would be followed by our weekly and monthly pivots, which are quite close to each other at 1.171 and 1.172. And of course, the important areas to note for our support would be these two areas. And I'm just zooming out of the chart slightly so that you can better see those areas. The areas of support would be this 1.157 area. And this is very important because there's a confluence of multiple support levels all converging on this area. And that includes the weekly S1, the monthly S1, as well as the yearly, I'm just going to see what it says. It says the yearly R1. So all of those areas is finding some additional strength by converging together, meaning if price were to move into this area, it would act as a very strong area of support. Just looking at a bullish scenario, should price manage to break through our area of resistance, and that means we'll have to get price above our monthly pivot at 1.172. That might mean that we will first test this area of resistance at 1.175. And if we get back above that, that would be very bullish, as we could perhaps re-enter this bullish channel. And then you'll see we have two more areas of resistance. And the most important one of these being the monthly R1 pivot at 1.180. Now just having a brief look at the economic calendar for the week. As you can see, there is very important events on the horizon for the economic calendar this week, especially on Tuesday. As you can see, that all day will be extremely volatile, pending this little event that I've highlighted on the screen over here. Then on Wednesday, there's some PMIs late in the afternoon. On Thursday, we have some monetary policy summaries, and also on later the afternoon, there's a FOMC statement and, of course, a press conference. And then on Friday, we have non-farm employment change and unemployment rates at 3:30. We are now moving on to the GBPUSD. Last week saw price break below the pivot of last month, and as mentioned in our video, price then proceeded to the short target that we set at our weekly S1 pivot at 1.289. And when we found that price found some initial support, and it's currently closed just below the new weekly pivot at 1.297. This means that the immediate area of resistance would be this monthly pivot and weekly pivot area between 1.297 and 1.3. And of course, any rejection or retest from this area would be important to keep an eye out for, as price action should indicate whether we will see a break higher or lower. Also note that we have our daily 100 SMA also right below us at about 1.287. And then, of course, the weekly S1 pivot also just below that at 1.285. So both of these areas might be important short-term or near-term short targets should price just continue to sell off into today, or perhaps if we see a pullback into our area of resistance and a rejection, that might lead to a retest of this area of support. Of course, should price manage to break above the monthly pivot at 1.3, the areas of resistance would be the weekly R1 pivot at 1.305, and that means that it's also probably then broken above this overhead diagonal, and that could take price as high as the monthly R1 pivot at 1.314. Also, just worth noting is that any rejection below the daily 100 SMA will probably see price continue to sell off towards this stronger area of support near the monthly S1 pivot at 1.278. We are now looking at Australian dollar to USD. As set out in our bearish scenario from last week, as soon as price lost the weekly pivot, that is the line that we have here in red at 0.710, we saw price then sell off, and it only found support at this lower diagonal, and this is also where we are finding price currently trading. And at this stage, it would be very important for price to hold on to this level, as anything below that will see a sell off to support at the weekly S1 pivot at 0.696, followed by the monthly S1 pivot at 0.693. And of course, should price manage to find its footing here, immediate area of resistance would be at 0.706, that is the weekly pivot. And should price get above that, the important one to keep an eye out for would be this area in between the monthly pivot at 0.709 and last week's pivot at 0.710, as this is also where we'll find some additional resistance from the 4-hour 100 SMA. And as we can see that this has been quite an obstacle to penetrate last week. And of course, should price manage to get above that, that would be considered bullish. And then, of course, that would open up new targets higher, including this monthly R1 pivot at 0.717, and then perhaps as high as the weekly RT pivot at 0.721. We are now moving on to the US 100 or NASDAQ. Last week, price convincingly broke below the important key level of 11,500. It briefly came back to retest this 4-hour 200 SMA. However, price has currently settled on the 100 daily SMA, which I've projected on the 4-hour. You can see that in this blue color over here. According to the current linear regression channel, it's quite likely that we will see a retest of our weekly pivot at 11,260. And any rejection from this area will then either consolidate around the area of the 100 daily SMA, or if it manages to break below that, there would be some areas of support, including the weekly S1 pivot at 10,800, the monthly S1 pivot at 10,620, and the weekly S2 pivot at 10,500. So those would be the monthly areas, the areas of support to keep an eye out for should price continue to break lower. For a bullish scenario, price would have to break above the weekly pivot at 11,260, and of course that could perhaps then see this area of the monthly pivot 11,450 retested, which would be a very strong area of support, as this is also where we converge with that 11,500 level as well as the 4-hour 200 SMA. Only with a break above this area, or let's rather say a close above this area, we will have another run at a bullish rally, and that could perhaps take us higher towards this area of our monthly R1 pivot at 11,925 to the weekly R2 pivot at 12,000. We are now looking at the Brent crude oil. Last week saw another large sell-off on Brent crude, and it quickly broke through all of our conservative targets, including our target at 40.55. However, we did notice a brief bounce from that area after continuing to sell off all the way towards this lower area of support, which is this lower diagonal. So at this stage, it would be very interesting to see how price is going to react and where the price will find its footing from this area of support. The immediate areas of resistance would include the weekly pivot at 39.02 as well as the monthly pivot at 39.60. So I do expect perhaps a slight pullback into this area. And then it would be best to just keep an eye on price action, as a rejection from this area would either see price consolidate or break even lower below this area of the lower diagonal, and that could open up areas of support of 46.16 to 35.53. That is the weekly S1 and monthly S1 pivots. However, if price manages to break above this 39.60 area, it could perhaps open up bullish targets of 40.74. That's where we have the weekly R1 pivot, and perhaps even as high as 42.02. That is the monthly R1 pivot, and just below this major diagonal overhead resistance. And moving on to gold. Gold saw a sell-off last week, with price quickly falling through our targets and also through this area of the daily 100 SMA. And currently price has found some support just below the 100 daily SMA. We can see that price has briefly retested the area, but then got rejected again. So at this stage, we can see that we have our weekly pivot at 1,883. That's just above where we are currently trading. And of course, also our monthly pivot at 1,890. So this now becomes the area of support, and this also acts as some additional confluence with the daily 100 SMA. So therefore, it would be very important for price to break above this 1,890 should we look for more bullish targets. However, if price were to reject from this area and start making new lows, it's possible that we will see areas of support being tested at either 1,855, which is the weekly S1 pivot, or the monthly S1 pivot at 1,847. That is also just above major diagonal support. We can see that we have this larger projected overhead diagonal, also converging just above our area of resistance of the monthly pivot. So if price can get above this level, there's a good chance that we will test this 1,095 level next, which was also a vital area of consolidation previously. And only above that would gold be considered bullish, and that would open up a lot of bullish targets, including our monthly R1 pivot at 1,920, as well as the weekly R2 pivot at 1,934. And finally, we are again concluding with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, or should we rather say Bullcoin, is continuing its impressive bullish run. And for those traders who have watched our video last week and stayed with price action after price broke through this important 13,363 level, so those guys are probably quite happy now and should be well in the money. And the reason this level was so important is that that was actually the high from 2 weeks ago. And we can see how price broke through that level, rallied, and then actually came back to retest this area. But we are now currently trading well above it, and as you can see, we are now in a bullish channel trading upwards. Immediate support would be the area of the weekly pivot at 13,550. That would be followed by 13,320, and that is where it will probably meet up with this area again, that important 13,365 area. There are some more areas of support, including yearly R1 pivot at 13,000 and also the monthly pivot at 12,765. So all of these are strong areas of support, and I believe that the strongest one of these would of course be this monthly pivot, as that also coincides with the current lower diagonal of the larger picture bullish channel. So it would be important for Bitcoin to stay above this dotted line in red. But like I said, that is probably where we'll find some strong support should we see price move lower. If price were to break below this channel, the areas of support would be closer to 12,225 as well as 12,075. And then just considering more bullish areas that we might see, you can see that we have some strong overhead resistance at 14.2, and in our R1 pivot at 43,050. And then of course all the way up, if we go to 14,000, it's about 14,000, where is that? 14,880, we have our weekly R2 pivot. So quite a few bullish targets to look out for, but like I said, always important to stay with price action, especially with instruments like Bitcoin. I trust you found value in this week's video. As always, please remember to subscribe, and if you would be interested in receiving trade setup ideas throughout the week, or if you would be interested in getting access to our free masterclass series, just go to our website www.rmdtrader.com to sign up quickly and easily. Until next time, this is John Jacobs for RMD Trader. Trade smart and trade successful.